I had an opportunity to meet Ron a long, 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 long time ago, and there was this. We kept hearing about this guy who could play drums, and he was absolutely ripping. And this blonde guy, he would come in and give clinics at the collective for years and like just absolutely tear the drum set apart, but then at the same time give all the students all this amazing knowledge on music business. And over the years it grew and it grew and it grew and it grew, and now Ron is worldwide, and he's just making his mark wherever he goes around the world. And we're very excited to have him here tonight with us, so I won't hold up the show anymore. Without further ado, please everybody give a big warm welcome to Mr. Ron Thaler, everyone.
Wow. Oh, baby. Do we have to stop? Okay, I guess we have to stop. Yeah. Mic working? Mic working? Everybody can see, everyone can hear, everybody, excellent. Okay, I'll try to speak loud, not loud, all of the above. Thank you, everybody, for coming this evening. I have spent, I spent 6 hours in another room earlier, basically doing a whole stream of music business seminars and little clips, 5 minutes to talk about a whole whack of things that I think kind of everybody in here really needs in their careers. I want everybody to understand that this stuff that I'm going to share with you, and it's feeling a little bit like I got to do a like a Monty Python's 3-hour tour of business, where you're ripping through 18 countries in Europe, and I'm going to give you about the quickest little splash on everything. But these are all things that, in my experience and in my time in music, have become necessary truths to know. You don't really have, we don't really actually have the freedom anymore not to know this stuff. There's so many online platforms, so many environments where you can learn and pick up and kind of formalize your knowledge. I, Tony, and a lot of people, Andy over there, we did not have the benefit of all this information. We basically had to figure it out by getting screwed. It's fundamentally the reality of what many of these business paradigms had led to in our lives. So who am I? This is some of the stuff that I've been involved with, that I've done, and some of which, let's say, I've suffered through. Other stuff I have benefited tremendously from. The streams and the albums, the Grammy, all that stuff talks about numbers. And I'm actually at some point going to speak to you guys in one of the slides about numbers and actually what they mean, what they really mean, not what they are purported to mean and not what they optically mean. RTP Productions is essentially the warehouse that I drive all my production work from, and my, let's call it my core business involvements with, as a musician, as an artist. SodaBox is a music licensing company based in both Delaware and in Florence, Italy, that does a lot of music synchronization. SoundSphere is my immersive sound, so I'm also involved in immersive sound. If you guys know what spatial sound is, and that's one of the new burgeoning areas in music. As is Listen 360, that's more about taking immersive sound and putting it into like movie theaters or arenas or places like that. Decibel Music is a new company that I started not long ago. It basically involves micro-sharing the intellectual property of some of the greatest and most well-known artists and their pieces of music. So micro-sharing has become a fairly modern parlance these days for how people can own a small little sliver of something that's very important. And I figured for musicians, right? We all love music. We all love musicians. We all love what it is that they do and what they're about. So I'm like, why can't all of us also benefit from the same monies and the same incomes that they do through participating in that same world. Most of the time, that world has been closed off to most, but not anymore with myself and some of my partners. Haus of Owl, which I believe is probably streaming this right now. Yo, Jordan and peeps, wherever you are. That's my people on the West Coast, and that's a multimedia company, and we do some crazy, wonderful, creative things. And then the Six Ways Records and Publishing is pretty much self-evident. That's a record company publishing. These people over here I've done stuff with. You can go online and find it. It's very easy to find me. I'm pretty visible. All of those experiences were exceptional ones for me, very different, each one from the other. And I learned through all of them something. And I'm hoping that I can share with you today. And because we are a nice crowd in here, I'm very happy to take questions. Also, so the people online can hear, by the way, if you have a question, and we can be somewhat informal and very energized here, just come up to the mic, turn the mic on, share the question with the thousands of enjoyable folks out in cyberspace, and then I will happily respond. And so, what is it I want to talk about? I have this thematic called What's the Deal? And we talk about involving ourselves in the music industry, mostly, first of all, because of love. So I never became a drummer, I never became a producer, a musician, thinking about money. I thought about the love of what I do, the fact that I really cared about it, and I couldn't really separate myself from the musician Ron or the human being Ron. To me, they basically were one and the same. But wanting to create, loving to create, doing it with a group of people or doing it alone is not sufficient in this modern world, in fact, in any world, to have a living that you make from it. There have to be processes in place. There have to be ways that you collect opportunities, that you leverage the awesomeness of what you have to offer, that you quantifiably can continue to do it. And there's some economic paradigms that are a little complicated that sort of screw with how easy it is to do it or not. So, as you can see, one of the things we're going to talk about is I want to share with everybody what the actual real economics are of music and of music making, because very few people ever talk about this. And it is desperately important, I think, for everybody to understand, because once you understand it, it's like anything. Then you can mitigate it, you can deal with it, and then you can find your way kind of through it for the way you do the things that you do. I want to talk a little bit about copyrights and publishing rights and master rights. Those are some of the most basic core things. I'm assuming some of you know some stuff about that. I'm going to hopefully add a little bit of knowledge to that kind of paradigm. Music agreements and contracts. This is probably the thing you're going to both hate and love at the same time, depending on how they turn out for you. But it's very important to understand all the ones that you're going to face based on all the ones that I faced. And I've probably, I think at last count, I probably signed 4,000, 5,000 contracts or agreements in my career. So having to do with all that stuff you saw before, but more specifically, to protect and to defend myself, and in particular, the honor of my child, namely the music or the content or the intellectual property that I'm involved in. I'd like to talk a little bit about labels, and again, music charts and what they actually mean, and a little bit about music sync, ways to make money, role of a manager. I don't know how many of you have had managers or involved yourselves with managers or ran away from managers, but I've found managers, at least in my life, except for the one who magically seemed to have fallen off the edge of the planet at one point and just completely disappeared off the face of the earth. I don't know what happened to this woman. Every other one, I know. I mean, it's like, where'd you go? Other than her, every one of my managers has been extremely productive and extremely helpful to me over many years. The power of marketing and social networks. This is always a bit of a divisive and quirky issue that we have to sometimes deal with, but I'm going to explain to you that for those who are from the older generation, there is really not a lot of difference between networking and social networking except speed and access. It's fundamentally, thematically, almost exactly the same thing. And historically, for anybody who was around in the networking as opposed to social networking era, it's the same principles. You don't network, you don't eat. It's pretty much that simple. Going to give you some clues on how to negotiate good deals for yourself. If you choose to be aggressive, if you choose to be not aggressive, different situations, different times, different things will dictate and help you in those contexts, mostly about understanding who's sitting on the other side of the table. And then basically to put it all together and to make a living at this, because this is a complicated lifestyle. I wouldn't trade it for anything. Okay, I wouldn't trade it for anything. But like every environment, you need to understand what you're up against, who your buddies are, and how you find your way through it. And that's from the beginning of musical time to today. So just a couple of quick comments. Like I said, I'm going to try and go through some of this as quickly as I can. God forbid I don't take a question at some point because we have to keep moving. But fundamentally, I want everybody to ask whatever they want at whatever time. Next comment to start with. It doesn't matter if you started in the music industry 50 years ago or you started 5 days ago. The same thing applies. Content is always king. It has always been king. It will always be king. Even for the king, content was king. So I say this, and I can't express how important what I just said is. Everybody loves their own shit, okay? Everybody thinks the content they make is the greatest shit since sliced bread. Everybody thinks that. When I say content is king, I'm not referring to how much you love what you do. I'm referring to how much others love what you do. And whether you like it or not, this industry and your position within the industry is dependent not just on your awesomeness. It's dependent on you building a phalanx of people to defend what it is you have to offer, and then beyond that, to help you move it forward. Content is king. It has always been, it will always be. You write a piece of music that sucks, it doesn't matter how much money you pour into it, because other people are going to remind you that it sucks. And I hate to be the one to have to tell you this, because I don't want anybody to fail at anything in life, but it is a functional truth. You are in the entertainment business. You are in an industry that requires other people to buy into what you're about. It's not just about you. It's not the me, it's the we. And this is a thing that I cannot tell you how often I have conversations with people about, and they don't see that because it's very self-serving to be an artist. It is all about you. You love what you do. You dig into it. I mean, the guys that are here at school, I mean, come on. You guys, you're going into the rooms, you're trying to find every minute you can to practice, to evolve, to meet other people. This is New York, too. I mean, you go outside, I mean, you could be sitting on a bus and, you know, you don't know, it's like the grandchild of Roy Ayers or whatever, and you start up a conversation and they go, oh, holy shit. And you get these moments that are, whoa, that's the shit. That's what builds you. But you cannot do this alone. I am one of the few people on this planet who will tell you there is no such thing as DIY. It's a complete friggin' fallacy. It is a device used mostly in music by music retailers to sell you shit. It is not a truth. Don't buy into it. There's no band of one. It doesn't exist. It's not a band. That's a solo artist with machinery. It doesn't exist. Doing it yourself. Did that particular person who's performing alone, did they build their computer? Did they build all the software? Did they build the road that brought them to the venue where they're performing that software? Of course not. So the quicker you can get out of your mind this notion of meism, and the quicker you can put in your mind this notion of weism, which is the entire history of music, truthful music, community, vibe, zones, periods, epochs of awesomeness. The quicker you buy into that, the quicker you're going to find your legs. The quicker you're going to find the quicker you're going to find all the people who give a shit about the same things that you do. And at the end of the world, the end of the day, not the end of the world, not the end of the world, at the end of the day, coming to the Sound Collective, this is a tribe. You've bought in to the vibe of the tribe. I welcome you. I extend my arms. I love what y'all is about. We all see the world essentially in what I think is more or less reasonably the same way. Now let's go do some shit. Period. Together, not apart. Don't exacerbate the apart. So I want to start off by talking really quickly about, 500 years of history of music in like 20 seconds flat. You're welcome. So definition of the music business. The artist has their view. Somebody want to share with me what an artist's view is of the definition of the music business? I'd love to hear from one of you. Okay, and there banks the silence of excitement right there. Not you. I know you too well. Then there's an industry view. What I want to point out is that a musician's view, and the way I wrote it, essentially is you want to make a living from art, right? That's your musician, that's your view of business. It's your own business. It's the business that you conduct. You use fans, you use venues, you use products, you use, above all else, technology. What's a business person's point of view on the world of art? Well, it's much simpler. It's basically selling what you do. So that started with printed paper. It evolved to basically Edison cones. And if maybe Tony remembers that at the base, at the bottom of, used to be a huge rehearsal building here in New York City, 251, well, Andy knows, at 251 West 30th. And it's like 200 floors of a bunch of crazy people getting together, making music, on an hourly. When you went downstairs onto West 30th, right in the corner of the building was a store. It's a store that sold tremendous numbers of vintage, beautiful, inexplicable gear. Shit that you couldn't even imagine. You're like, what the hell is this? And in that store is where I first discovered the Edison cone. So Thomas Edison, or Con Edison, as you guys know today, because you basically get the bill every month, he created among the first captures of recorded music that you could then play for yourself in your own home. And it's a cone. It literally looks like the inner center of the toilet paper if you were to put ridges on it and make it a little firmer. What's amazing, and what I want to point out about the Edison cone, is that also influenced in New York City architecture. People are like, huh? How the hell did they do that? Well, if any of you have been to homes in Brooklyn, and particularly homes that are in Prospect Park South area, A lot of those homes are turn-of-the-century homes, previous century. Inside them, and it's amazing because I used to have a friend who had a recording studio that he built in the basement of one of these homes, and really nice space. He had inside the house, it was a 4-story, one of these, really beautiful homes. He had a shaft running right up alongside the staircase that went up all floors. And in this shaft, at the bottom, was essentially an Edison cone music player. So you'd put the cone in, rock and roll, off it goes, and you'd open these doors on whatever floor, and because of the verb and the transference of the sound, it would just come out and disseminate into the floor. And I gotta tell you, it sounds freaking awesome, okay? Because he played me some music. I'm like, holy crap. This is builds. These are architectural thinkings as a feature of why do you have a home? It's a place of comfort. It's a place of positivity. So literally, that kind of a strategy shows how important what it is that we do. It's not just a gimme. It's just not a throwaway. It's something that is very powerful and very important for people's well-being. It has value. And I'm going to keep coming back to this word value. We're going to talk about value all the time today. A business person now has gone from that to vinyl records, right? To frickin' Spotify. So think about that as a crazy evolution, right, of what it is that used to be versus where we are. Speaking about, the 1400s to the 1900s, I mean, if we want to talk about it really quickly, we talk about Ottaviano Petrucci, who basically was one of the first fellas to corner the world of publishing. He had a 20-year monopoly in Venice to print out music sheets. Anybody who needed a music sheet for anything, you had to go to him. And you can imagine there was a few kickbacks, back in the day, of course, to this king or this queen or this prince of this zone or whatever. Let's not say that it's all that different in some regards in this modern world when you want to talk about certain physical publishings. Gutenberg Bible came out to say there's all these features of that era that kind of technologically allowed for all this shit to happen. It's just the printing press, right? And the printing press allows for sheet music to be made. How did artists make money back then? Right? Because there were artists. You had sheet music makers. Obviously, it's because there was music to be made and music to be played. So how did artists make money? Whole different and utterly the same system as today. And I say that because you can draw a direct line and direct link between how they made money. So the first thing is patronage systems. And a patronage system is really saying, hey, I'm rich. I don't like my neighbor. I want to have a competition with him. I'm going to invite this composer. He's going to stay in my place. I'm going to give him a little beautiful little house in the back, and he's just going to do special events and write, for my daughter's 16th birthday or whatever the hell it is. And then I'm going to invite my neighbors over so that they feel bad, so that then they're going to have to do the same thing. And this became a very competitive system. It's another way of basically saying, okay, you got your stuff that you created or recorded, you got your stuff that you created and you recorded, now let's see who can rise to the top. This is a very straightforward system. And it kept musos employed. Next things, special commissions. Funerals. Big music and funerals. Write a whole whack of songs for people who are dead, who can't even enjoy it. Tell me how that's different than people going on tour today as holograms when they're dead. Okay, I'm sorry, but you can draw very easy comparatives between these two features. And we're going to get to that at some point, but I got to point out to you that if you look at the math, it's crazy. Those hologram tours of the legacy artists, all of whom are dead, the top 10 estates made something like $500 million in the last couple of years from those tours. They gross more than the average tour of any other artist, except maybe Taylor Swift. So I don't know how many Swifties there are now. At least I know one. You're going to stay seated and don't go crazy. So pre-Taylor Swift's reorganization of the mathematics of the planet, if you were 53 years old, you were the average concert goer going to the environments that made the most money. And those ones were hologram-derived environments. Think about that. So, hey, I made music for dead people. The other thing that the special commissions also used to make is music for operas. And so we are still to this day hearing and listening and going and participating in those operas. So you're talking about some kick-ass composers who really had their shit together and were fundamentally, okay, I got to make money. I got to feed myself. This is nothing new. It's exactly the same as today. They used to do one-off concerts. You know what we call those today? Touring. They used to just go around to different cities. They do recitals. They do special performances. Sometimes a person would have a new thing that they wanted to present in an environment. So they say, hey, I know you're a killer violin player and you want to hop on a horse and come over here. I got some loot for you and some grub, maybe some swill. You know, we'll see. See how good the show goes. Touring, ta-da, there's no freaking difference. It's the same thing, except technologies, timelines, and things have evolved. They've changed. We're in the sound collective here. Another major form of income in the past, teaching. Except back in the day, the real money was in teaching the daughters or the family members of well-to-do folks for the exact same reason that they had in-house composers, because they wanted to compete against their next-door neighbors, or little cotillion offs, or any of those kinds of get-togethers where people would essentially show how well they could do it. It was expected of people at that time, that your daughter would have these abilities in music. Man, I would wish for that to be back. I would love every person that I know who has a child say, hey, I want to put that child through music. It engrosses, it raises their internal profile, it contributes to society, to the world. Rock and roll, as far as I'm concerned, that's just not the way it is anymore, unfortunately. And then the last thing is and kind of the most popular is basically church composers. So Johann Sebastian Bach is the most known of those. And he's like, hey, where's the money? How is that any different than today? We're the richest institutions on the planet. The church. Hence, Johann Sebastian Bach is like, hey, let me write some great stuff for you guys. They're like, okay, great. We'll just keep you in-house. And he basically did that for the majority of his professional life. And he has written some stuff that is extraordinary and lives to this day. So, right, that's 14 to 1900. Well, I'm not going to talk about publishing's birth. I just want to talk to you about a couple of things in the night, because otherwise we're going to be here for like 6 hours and you're going to hate my guts by the end of this. There's lots of stuff that happened in the most recent 100 years. Tons of stuff. So the whole Western music industry is the rise of digital and online distribution, all these things. But there is one thing that has impacted everybody in this room more than anything else, and that is consolidation. And so consolidation in a market shift fundamentally means the following. When I first arrived to New York, there basically was what everybody would call the Big Six. 5 labels and essentially the world of the indies, all running things, interchanging back and forth, lots of energy, lots of money, lots of things, lots of everything. Then what happened? Big Six became the Big Four after a bunch of them got eaten. And then by the early, I think 2010, 2011, it became the Big Three. Now, why this is important is that you can imagine that consolidation invariably tends to decrease the number of people, let's say, per artist in a catalog than it did before. That's the whole point of consolidation. Save money in one side, make more money on the other side. But there is, for us, in our current realities, an even more important feature to that. When it was the Big Six, the separation between everybody empowered indies. Indies represented about 23, I think it's 23 to 25% of all the label monies, when call that whatever you want, label opportunities, involvements, brand partnerships. They basically generated and oversaw and were kind of energizing that. After the consolidation, that number went from 23 to about 11%. So what it's fundamentally meant is that opportunities for the average artist shrunk, monies dissipated, and why this is all very important is because you guys are feeling the impact in your current careers of exactly what that says. Everybody is trying to fight for a morsel, and it goes back to that very first thing I said. If you continue to fight for morsels as individuals, if you continue to do it as meists, not weists, ultimately, the majority of you are going to fail because the structure is built that way. Community, which was essentially built in how the big six were built, was the most prosperous per capita time in the music industry. We are now in math, in actual math, right? The COVID murdered it, digitalization to some degree murdered, but we are now coming back to essentially mathematically where the industry was, roughly around mid-2000s, monetarily speaking. But it's going to keep growing, and it's growing because of streaming, it's growing because of certain things financially, but that doesn't mean, by my definition, the industry is growing. What it means is that shit is pervading. For me, that's a big frickin' problem. I'm a record producer. I'm a drummer. I'm a person that does a lot of business and a lot of different things. I have no patience, and I can't stand being aligned, being involved with crud. Okay? Crud that is delusionally pushed as if it isn't. And there's reasons why this happens. There's reasons how this has occurred. This is not just by accident. It's not just a bunch of musos suddenly don't know what the hell they're doing. It's not that simple. It's much more layered. I think the fact that you guys are here at the Sound Collective makes me feel great. Like, at least here, people are going to put in your ears a lot of, first of all, musical earworms, I hope. But beyond that, they're going to teach you some fairly important shit. Like, this is bullshit, and this is real. This is what you got to do. Don't be scared of working on an instrument. Not everything is just about off of a Mac to create music. There's way more things still available to you, and it's proof. And I'm sharing this with you because there's a thing that's known in the industry right now called regenerative simplicity. We have come back to this notion that the mind-crushing smashing of a whole whack of things that a machine can do for you is not necessarily the road to nirvana, the road to making money. There's a lot of backpedaling to way more organic sounds, people together, just recording in, live off the floor. I literally, 3 days before I came here, I finished producing a band on the west coast of Canada that fought tooth and nail to make sure that literally that's how they were going to do the process. They didn't want a multi-track. They said, okay, we'll do some overdubs, but we want the truth of what we have to say with its imperfections to come off the floor because we know that that is what people give a shit about again. There's all this involved in new sonic technology, which is comedically all the old sonic technology, just made into new apps, new approaches, new things that you can just foundationally recreate anyways in the 1176s, the EQP1s, all these particular machines that have existed forever. Why do people give a shit about this? If the new is so fandangled, awesome, and perfect, they give a shit about this because the old is new again. Regenerative simplicity. And if you are aware of this, and yourself as an artist, you have a clarity and you have an understanding, okay, This is going to help me expand what I have to offer, who I have to offer it to, and who do I partner with to kind of make that happen. So, okay, well, that was 12 seconds worth of the history of music. I hope you all walk away with a deeper understanding of nothing. Thank you very much. Okay, next very, 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 very important thing for everybody to understand. The economics of music, they don't work like anything you've ever seen in your life before. All of you are operating under the principle of economic theory that is the kind that you operate every day, right? If socks are cheaper, then they're either poorer in quality or I can buy more of them and keep my feet warm, right? So greater supply means lower demand, or rather, sorry, greater supply means higher demand, fewer supply, lower demand. That impacts prices. This is nothing new. This is how you guys have lived your whole lives. But there are things that do not operate based on that at all. One of them is music. Congratulations. You've all entered the world of the exception. And there's two major things that dictate these exceptions. We're going to just go simply right away to, we're going to just talk about the economics. I think that's probably all the time we're going to have. There's two market forces. One is called, or built around what are known as Giffen or Veblen goods. And I remind everybody that music is not a consumable, it is a commodity. Although we love to talk about consuming music, like we're music is not toothpaste. You don't use it, it finishes, and you replace it. That's what a consumable is. A commodity is something that stays firm and that you can leverage for whatever you want over a much longer period of time. Veblen goods and Giffen goods are things that, as the price goes up, more people want to buy it, which makes absolutely no sense, right? Doesn't mean they can, but it means they want to buy it. So, perfect example, Miles Davis's trumpet. Okay? So, the higher the price of Miles Davis's trumpet, the more people want to buy it. Why? Because of its intrinsic value. They think that they're going to pick it up, go toodle-toodle-toot-toot, and suddenly they're going to become Miles Davis, which is insane. And nobody would ever believe that, really. But nonetheless, this intrinsic value, this magic associated with that horn, suggests to people that its intrinsic value supports this idea that the higher the price, the more people want it, right? A piece of art, the Mona Lisa, right? The higher it goes in price, the more people are willing to pay for it, the more they want it. That's literally a Veblen good, which tends to be more of a luxury item. A Giffen good is a little bit on the lower scale and is a little more price sensitive and has a couple of other features and other issues associated with it. But fundamentally, that's the problem. You're like, ugh. So in music, for performers and for participants, we often talk about that side of it as feast or famine. That's the feast or famine reality. If you're successful, kaboom! You charge more to go, to promoters. So who now believes that, for example, Taylor Swift can't pretty much charge any freaking number she wants, any freaking place to do any freaking thing, right? Talk about market power. That's a perfect example of a Veblen good. She is a morphing, living Veblen good. The other half of this extremely peculiar, weird equation, the other half is what's called free riding. And free riding is what they call a problem of economics. It is built around the idea that if a resource is freely available to a person, they are basically going to undervalue it simply because of how it exists as a resource. Simple example. What do we do in music? Shit flies through the air, right? So that means, how many times have you been invited by whoever to come to a party and say, bring your instrument. Just play for us. It'll be fine. We'll enjoy it. It'll be fun. Everybody will love it. It'll be great. Right? And I'm like, F you, no. What I do has value, just like what you do has value. You know, Mr. Doctor, Mr. Accountant. It's funny, with Thomas Lang, I was performing at a drum festival, at the Australian Drum Festival. Oh, it's many years ago. And we were literally talking with a whole bunch of people that came from the festival back to the hotel and just sitting at the bar and just talking about why is it that people undervalue art? They undervalue what it is that you have to contribute to the world of art. You put in as many freaking hours. I mean, I know I did. I'm at about 65, almost 70,000 hours now doing this professionally, right? How's that any different than what a doctor invests in their time, an accountant invests in their time, anybody in a very advanced field that really cares about what they do? There's no difference, except the market dynamics that exist in that world. So, free writing is a horror story. The way I can explain it in the simplest form is you might be a conscientious objector. You might not like the military. I'm one of those people. I don't like the military. I don't like to kill people. I'm a make love, not war kind of guy. But the reality here is, if there suddenly is a war in a particular area and I've decided I'm not paying my tax, I don't want my tax dollars to go to you folks doing all these war things, the square airspace above my house, do I really believe it's not going to be defended by the Air Force? You understand? I'm just getting a benefit without having to pay for it. This exists all the time in music because music travels through the air. This is how come we had to develop structures as a society. First in the UK for copyright and onwards to establish value in what it is that we do. And that's a very complex conversation. One of the first pieces of understanding of it is what is intellectual property. An intellectual property, and I will read you literally, intellectual property is defined as a work or invention that is the result of creativity to which one has rights and for which one may apply for a patent, copyright, trademark, etc. As a musician, as artists, as creators, that is what you are defending. It's the product of your creative efforts. It's intellectual property. But understand, intellectual property is a human construct. It is a philosophy. And now it's a feature of statutes and law and so forth, but it doesn't mean music doesn't travel through the air. And it doesn't mean that people won't, because of it, undervalue what you do, let alone assume, oh, you're already such a great player and so on, you know, this comes easy to you. Man, I've had that conversation with so many people, I can't even tell you. And you do not want to know how that conversation ended. It did not end nicely for the other party because I will defend what we do because I really give a shit about what we do. And I think more of us need to be very vocal in defending what it is that we do, especially as we evolve and especially as we continue down this process of learning about ourselves, creating, and stuff that I do today isn't the same stuff I did 20 years ago. Probably the same for Andy, probably the same for Francis, but you know, it's we all have our paths, but you have to defend that path. And under no circumstances can you ever allow anybody else to tell you what you do does not have value. People play with that word a lot, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about it as we keep going here. Before I go on to crush you with more information, does anybody have a question so far about the insanities of our life? Nope. Here we go. Deer in headlights. Oh my God, I'm just about to get run over by more Ron. I'm so sorry. Oh, hold on. Francis has one. Please speak into the microphone, Francis, if you have a question. Come on. Come on up. Speaking to the microphone loud and clear for everybody. You got to turn the microphone on, I believe.
Hi.
This is Francis,
Hi.
everybody.
I'm tall. I'm going to do this. So you're speaking to the Taylor Swift phenomenon, and though I am a Swiftie, self-proclaimed, what I find very interesting is there was a fluke with one of her albums a few years ago where there was basically 2 minutes of sizzles and airspace and it went to number one because optically it was from her. What is your reaction to optically the power she holds with that, and is that something that I guess what is your reaction to that, and what should be changed about the industry or altered in that way?
We all got 17 hours for me to answer this question. I'll turn the microphone off. It's okay. So the first thing I'm going to say is there's been many movements in music over many years. Rock the Vote was one that existed in a little bit more my era. Any artist doing anything to bring people into what I'd say a better place on this planet, I am not going to stand in the way. I will only congratulate them, because that's already hard. What she's doing in this modern world is essentially creating an economic and a political force. And Havel, who was the first, I guess officially is the prime minister of Czechoslovakia when it separated, of the Czech Republic, when it separated from Slovakia and it was no longer Czechoslovakia. He is a poet and a writer. Same token, the French, at one point before the euro became the common currency, the French had the French franc. And what did they have on their 50 French franc bill? What did they have? They had Saint-Exupéry, who is the writer of The Little Prince, one of the most regarded, one of the greatest books that probably everybody here had to study, in school in one way, shape, or form, in all the, whatever language is your national language. They put him on a $10 bill, the most commonly used bill at the time. What does that say about the value of arts, politically, socially, and financially? I think that's a great statement. You ask me about Taylor Swift, and I look at her and I go, I have never met anybody or never seen anybody as effective at corralling humans into positive expression of their truths. It's extremely easy to gaslight, to dox, to cancel people. That's easy as shit. What's really hard is on the aggregate, in a big picture, to make moves, to participate in things that add value added to our society. Anybody doing that in any profession, I support. Because we are, and you know this, and for those of you who are not from the United States who now are here, well, lucky for you, what you get to see with how divisive this country is, how crazy certain things are politically, humanistically. We don't live in a society anymore where it's, hey, let's talk about it. We live in a society, it's either you're with me or you're against me. That's garbage. Anybody who can change that, who can actually have a strong lever in that, rock and roll. I'm all about them, and I will do everything to support and help them. She impacts GDP. She impacts it in a positive way. What I don't think she has done yet, and what I'm hoping she's going to do in the next few months, is assert some form of humanist political power to truly impact what I expect would be the betterment of the world. And that could start here in the United States, as far as I'm concerned. I don't think I'm really hiding my perspectives on politics. That's okay. I'm not here to be a politician. I'm just here to tell you guys what I believe to be the truth. So whatever generated interest in her, whatever raised her, what you were mentioning, other projects, other situations, her taking back her publishing and leaving Scooter with the old masters and then reframing all those old masters and creating new recordings where fundamentally the old masters, although in some way some of those I personally musically prefer, has taken all the financial energy out from underneath him and said, I'm the artist, I'm the musician, I'm the one making the creations, I'm here, let's deal right now. That kind of stuff for me is beautiful because it's about the right things. It's not about the wrong things. And there's a lot of wrong things going on. And anything anybody does for those wrong things and to change them, I'm all about it. Here's one wrong thing, the black box. Okay, well, again, you guys probably know about PROs. I'm assuming, you know, copyright publishing and mastering rights, you know, the second you create a piece of music, second you make right words, concretized, not just in your mind. They have to be physically concretized. You own a copyright. Just like if you're a coder and you write code that does or creates something, you own a copyright on your code. Publishing rights so your copyright is split into two, what are called publishing rights and master rights. Publishing rights is built on the underlying composition, the actual music that you've created, the vibage, the specialness of the song and the movement through the sections and the words and the top line of the vocal if it exists. The master rights are when you take that and you affix it, and master rights comes from the old master tape mindset. You affix it and you replicate it and it becomes a physical sound recording. When you own the copyright for something, you own all of that. Then it's up to you. Do you parse it out? Do you sell it? Do you make third-party deals? Do you do all those things? Those are all available to you. But that's what that is. But on this page, what I want to talk to you about is the black box. Black box, the hellhole of hellholes. Black box is basically when somebody owns a copyright or a publishing company owns a position in a publishing in some publishing some work, but they're unattributable. So unattributable means, in this modern world, don't know who wrote it, or you haven't logged it correctly, or it's not accessible except in certain territorial environments. The list goes on and on and on. There's also structural things associated specifically with the way monies are collected for owners and ownership. If none of that is attributable, it goes into this magic thing called the black box. This black box essentially is on a 3-year rotation. So if something goes in the year 2017, whatever's in there from 2017 gets paid out in 2020. That black box goes to now the big 3. It used to go to the big 6. Capiche? Understand what I'm saying? That all the monies from all the creative efforts done by all peoples that is unattributable goes to benefit a small group of people who've done nothing. Okay, important knowledge, important for you to understand. Hence, moral of the story, make damn sure your paperwork is in freaking good order with anything you do. Make sure you know about all the paperwork. Make sure you know about all the ways you can make money. Because if you're not making the money, I'm here to tell you somebody else is. And oftentimes, the way they make that money is by going straight into the black box. And that's crappy. Because I believe, as I spoke about with Thomas Lang, everybody deserves to be paid and compensated responsibly for what it is that they do. It doesn't mean they need to be overpaid. It also does not mean they need to be underpaid or bureaucratically shuffled off the edge of the table and never see any money. I don't believe in that kind of shit. But this is a responsibility you must take. You are the reason you're going to make money. So you are also the reason that the bureaucracy must be put into place correctly. Look at all these contracts and agreements. They go for miles. Miles and miles and miles and miles and miles. Yeah. Da, 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 da. Okay. there are a bunch of basics, and maybe more important than talking to you guys, because in a short time about all the label and publisher agreements you're going to see, all the artists and producer agreements, the songwriter, the production performance agreements, all the band agreements. You're invariably going to face all of these at some point in some way in your career if you're part of a band, independently, individually, whatever it is. More important is to understand why the hell there are contracts. Way more important. Because details are details. And if you have a decent lawyer, or you have a family member that understands and reads these things, or you know Ron, who reads and has dealt with about 5,000 of these things over his life, what you need to understand is the core reasons behind why there exists contracts to begin with. These are thematics and philosophies that are, interestingly, and very few people know this, derivative from the Talmud, which is a Judaic book that's a biblical book that is mostly built on societal and normalization of practices between peoples. So, how does one deal with a dispute in one context? How does one deal with the rights to build somewhere where maybe they're not allowed to build? These are all Talmudic truths, and they've basically been rehashed and repurposed over a hell of a long time to come to today to what we know as foundational agreements. Music has their whole chunk of them. Every business has their own chunk of them. But music, and the ones that we have to deal with, are all about providing clarity, helping to avoid disputes and misunderstandings, preventing misrepresentations, and basically miscommunications when it comes to details and agreements. They offer you better management, so you actually know what the hell is going on. And that you could say, this is what this says, this is supposed to be going on. If that's not going on, then you have something that says, the fuck? What's happening? Why is this not going on in this way? They basically offer a structure of how to resolve disputes. And above all else, in this modern world, they offer documentation. And we know that although a verbal agreement between people is as legally enforceable as a written agreement, it's much harder to prove a verbal agreement. He said, she said. Great. What then? Where do we go with that? So, I implore you, documentation, write it down. The other thing that's super important to know about contracts really quickly is what the hell makes a contract actually active? Because most people are not aware that you've got to have a bunch of shit in it. And if it doesn't, it's not enforceable and it's not real. It's just a bunch of words on a piece of paper. And the difference is that contracts and contract law are protected by statutes, just like copyright law is protected by statutes. That's government legislative things. You can't undo it easily. As opposed to common law, which is basically normalized practices. And this is how we do things normally in the music industry, or this is how we do things normally in the car sales industry. There's difference between industrial practices and statutes. And statutes are basically like the giant that comes swinging the hammer to smash those who don't follow its policies. The other parts of it, common law, changing, evolving, shifting. It's very, very hard to change statutes. And agreements, contracts are enforceable based on statutes, which means they have real power. And what we all need and what we do is power. Now, what does it got to have? It's got to have an offer. Something's got to be offered. I give you this for this. It's got to have acceptance. I accept you giving me this for this. It's got to have consideration. That's the term in law for loot, or what is being exchanged, right? So I'm going to give you this, and you're going to give me this. Whatever those thises are that you exchange, that's called consideration. Mutuality of obligation. Both sides need to understand their obligations, and they must commit to those obligations. If they do not commit to those obligations, you don't have an agreement. You don't have a contract. You just have a bunch of words on a piece of paper. You need to have competency and capacity. And I've got to do a quick little left turn here because this is something that I, in my entire professional career, like I said, in signing 5,000 or more contracts at this point, competency and capacity basically means that you have the ability to fundamentally enter the agreement. You understand what it's basically saying, and you're okay with what it says. I have recently been smacked in the face by the fact that somebody misrepresented to me their competency and capacity in the context of an agreement, even though they signed off and said everything was rock and roll, everything was perfect, right? So that's essentially non-disclosing to me a truth. I'm telling you, I've done this for freaking years. There's shit that will come out from corners you can never imagine. So that's why at least you must have this locked down as the basics for these freaking agreements. The final thing, and this is the one again, it talks about documentation, but for me, a written instrument. Now, not all agreements need to have written instruments, but there are some, like real estate and so on and so forth, that absolutely must have written instruments. I recommend, under all circumstances, just freaking write everything down. Put it in words. And sometimes it's tough because when you talk about band agreements, right? Let's talk about a band agreement. Those are fun, where y'all get to sit down and say, hey, okay, so we're a bunch of guys, we're making music, we love everything, it's rock and roll. And then one guy says, yeah, but I think I contribute more of the songs than you guys do, so how about we negotiate a different split? As opposed to essentially saying, hey, okay, solidarity, we're all in this band together, so, you're the drummer, yeah, you still compose shit, you still contribute, you do this and that, because as a drummer, you cannot tell you how many times I've heard this garbage. Solidarity, for me, is, again, it's the same way to go, but it's community. It's viewing things, just like I said from the beginning of this talk. It's literally built on that responsibility to others, that framework. It's not meism, it's weism. And as I've said multiple times to multiple people, the faster you can get out from underneath meism and the quicker you can get to weism, the quicker the promised land of your career and everything associated with it will find you. I guarantee this. Most artists fail that I have seen in my entire career because they build their world on meism. Me, just like DIY, DIY, DIY. It's all a pile of optics-driven garbage. There's no such thing. But it's very easy to think everything is you. I remember some of the label artists in the West Coast of Canada, whose name I shall not utter in public, who I had this entire conversation with. And she said, well, yeah, it's all me if I succeed, and it's all me if I fail. I'm like, no, that's not true. It's just never true. That's just not even plausible to discuss that. I want to talk about, okay, sorry, I know. Well, like I said, it's a 3-hour tour of Europe we're doing here as a business thing. It's a Monty Python. So as freaking fast as I can go through some of these things that I think are really important for you to know, are there any questions? And not from Francis, somebody else.
I didn't raise my hand.
Excellent. Somebody. Any other questions from anybody? Yes, no, maybe, perhaps? Oh, okay. There's a microphone. Going up, you're a performer. Show us how you perform on a microphone. Just make sure to turn it on. Excellent. What's your name, brother?
I'm Noah. I'm also a drummer, and I wanted to ask, when did you start drumming as a musician, and then you transition to becoming a producer? You start out with both being a producer and a drummer, and when did you transition into being like just a producer or doing big projects like that with those major artists and stuff like that?
Thank you very much for the question, Noah. We'll turn. Thank you. So it's an interesting question. My personal. So I'll start at the scholastic point. I did not study music or production or anything. I went to university and studied commerce with a specialization in transportation and logistics and a minor in political economy. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my life. I never used it in a professional sense, except for using it in a professional sense every single freaking day of my life. So I had the benefit already of understanding some of these mechanisms. But my career started as a drummer, as a wide-eyed, bushy-tailed guy who jumped in his bunny white van and drove to New York City from what I call the top left-hand corner of the world, which is Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, through my studies in Vancouver. And I'm like, no, I got to get to New York because I want to mix it up with, the real folks and doing the real shit. So I benefited tremendously from an incredible amount of work. It's when I met Andy, and we've known each other for years, and we have some bloody hilarious stories about rehearsal spaces and people dropping concentrated urine and ammonia down pipes while the poor man is there, and he's like, Ron, you better come down here. Some bad shit's going down. Oh yeah, so these are some of the New York stories that you can only benefit from in New York. So I came to New York. I knew one person. I gave them one call. They never returned my call. I'm like, welcome to the big city. This is how this operates. Worked my way up the ranks. Went to every single environment I possibly could. Met everybody I possibly could. And eventually, after I start to get on stage, I start to get invites. One of the comments in I think one of these slides that I say is, you really know you're doing something from a business augmentation level for yourself. You really know you're doing something right when you're on stage, and the second you get off stage, there's folks there say, hey man, that was great, I really enjoyed it. Are you free next week? Are you free next month? I got a recording, or I got a thing, or hey man, help me with this, can I get your advice on this or that? That's how you know. It's not you selling yourself, because in music, this is not a resume-driven industry. This is a performance and truth and results-based industry. So if you're on stage, you do some great shit, people are going to come up to you. I guarantee it. It's just how it works. And if they don't, that means you need to reassess some of the things that you think, and in particular, possibly how you hear yourself. So we have tremendous technologies today that make it really super easy to record yourself while you're performing, when you're on stage, this and that. That was a new thing in my era, where I'd have a Walkman and I basically record myself, and I'm like, ooh, is that what I sound like? Ooh, is that what I'd sound like if I was like an audience member listening to myself? Ooh, wow, that sucks. You better make that better, right? That was, from back in the day, that was a Weckelism. And so taught me to listen from the audience perspective to what it is that I was contributing in these musical contexts. Super amazing, helpful. As I kept growing through the ranks here, playing with, label artists, not label artists, doing a ton of sessions. I started to basically get hired to do more and more recordings. Like you saw in the first slide, I think the number I'm at right now is about 460 something recordings. And really love the environment. I love being in the studio. I love having all my gear, ridiculous numbers of snares, ridiculous numbers of cymbals. I just really dug it. And, I'm like, huh? And I kind of built the way I play to a certain, I would consider it clarity and elegance of purpose in a context which allowed me to think, hey, this is an artist. They come in, they give me this song. I've got to play to fulfill and energize their truth. I could still be very creative and very thoughtful in what I contribute, but it's really about their energy. It's really about their purpose behind it. So that thinking served me extremely well. And as I kept doing that and working for some of the greatest producers, unfortunately some of whom are dead now, like Arif Mardin, I used to have, when Arif and some of the higher level guys were not particularly, let's say, producing these sessions and so on, I'd have like the artist, and this is literally how my production career started, I swear to God. I'd have the artist come over and say, Ron, they didn't want the producer to see, right? What do you think of the drum sound? What do you think of the bass sound? Eventually, it just kept growing and growing and growing, where they started asking me about all the everythings. And, you know, I loved, if I was just hired to do drums and my session was 2 or 3 hours, let's say, and then I had nothing afterwards, I would freaking hang out. I just freaking watched the rest of the session. I wanted to learn from the producer. I didn't want to learn about mechanical techniques. I wanted to learn about decision making. So Ron as a producer is built on decision making, aesthetics, and how things feel. I always work with an engineer because my focus as a producer needs to be on the artist and on the art. So as this process kept building, the artist just started to ask me to produce after a certain point. And then a lot of the technical side of it, I fundamentally picked up as I kept going through all these albums as a record producer. Start to understand certain things. Also, as a drummer, having played on so many things, I knew a lot of information. I knew a lot of basics about not only microphone techniques and so forth, because drums is the most complex instrument to studio record of any instrument. In fact, it's the remaining, almost the remaining sole instrument that is extremely susceptible and sensitive to the rooms in which it's recorded. There's about 50 to 60 core setups for recording drums. And once you understand those, and you know, after all the albums that I've done, I mean, I basically had seen most of those through some great eyes and understanding what the purpose was and so forth, and then hanging out and watching, well, how did they track the guitars? When did they put the mics in that way? What are they running it through? It's all this stuff. And then what was the feeling about it? You want to see the most impressive thing I ever learned in a studio from Phil Ramone? Because I can show it and I can demonstrate it to you right now. I can demonstrate it. So you know this. So I want to get a victim up here. Who would like to be my victim for this demonstration? Oh, especially when I call it a victim. Nobody. Is Madge still here? No? Okay. Who wants? Okay, come on up. So, imagine, what's your name?
Fernando.
Okay, we'll turn the mic on.
Fernando.
Nice to meet you, Fernando.
Pleasure.
Awesome. So we'll leave the mic on.
All right.
So, Fernando, you are, I'm going to just move the mic over here like this. So, you are tasked by the producer. We got a female vocalist coming in to do background vocals. She is really awesome. We don't have a lot of time. I need you to set up the microphone for her in this particular spot. So take the stand and set it up as you would normally for, like, you know, yourself or whatever. And how would you set it up for her?
Is she tall or is she short?
Let's say she's about your height. Hey, here, we'll put it out front here a little bit. Okay, let's say she's about your height. Yeah. Okay. I swear to God, you're going to understand why this is so relevant in 1 second. Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Is the microphone turned on?
It is.
Okay.
No, it is. Yeah. Okay.
Awesome. You're fired.
Am I?
And I'm going to explain to you why. And I'm telling you, this is still to this day, this is the single most powerful thing I ever learned from Phil Ramone. And I make damn sure everybody who's my assistant in the studio or any environment I go to adheres to this religiously. Who's coming in to sing?
The back vocal, the artist.
Right. So it's not the artist, the backup vocalist.
Yeah.
Male or female?
Female.
Right. We live in an era where male-dominant crap in the industry has created a lot of big problems. You have set up this microphone stand so that when a woman stands here, she has to spread her legs because the leg is thrown in between. And as ridiculous and subtle as that is, it will psychologically affect immediately the performer. Out of respect and out of deference to the individual who comes into the studio, what you need to do is set it up like that. Okay? And I watched this, and I remember, so thank you very much, Fernando. Thank you for, okay. So I remember watching this go down and go, holy shit. That is so powerful. It also explains why in many contexts, when you see female vocals, you see them on television screens or in movies or whatever, the mic is coming from above them, because there is no value in psychologically diminishing an individual based on how it is you as a man act in a context. So I say this because these kinds of details are the things that I picked up which enabled me to become, and this is a very long answer to an extremely reasonable, normal question, I started to just produce. I started to listen. I started to get involved with people. I started to try to help them. And as I got deeper and deeper with that, after already having been with recording artists and so on beforehand, just as a player, knowing a lot of business people in the industry, in publishing and in the record side and master side of stuff and so on, I started to comprehend the strategies necessary to achieve their goals, not to achieve the goals of others of them. And the reason I understood that is because I come at production not from a scholastic point of view, but from a musician's and artist's point of view, in the context, while I can bridge and speak all that other language. So I was able to, and this is what they've told me on many occasions, I could defend them and their interests by fundamentally allowing them to be themselves. And the managers and all the labels and all those other folks, I could essentially talk the talk with them and keep them backed off so that the art was true and it was honest. And I tell you one other thing. Do not be fooled by the term genre of music or style of music. Do not be fooled by this. It is a marketing term. When you as an artist create music, you create music, period. That's it. You create what you feel, you create what you think. The more stylized and directed you undertake with your creative forces, you basically do not empower your future. You shorten it. And so for me, the creative impetus, the energy that comes from honest creation, which is one of the most founding features of this environment, for me, rock and roll. That's why I'm in music. That's why I continue in art. Holy schmazzoli, a question from the chat. Okay. God, I hope it's a respectful one. It is. Excellent. Okay. Awesome. I think you need to turn the mic on.
All right, so this question is from Jody in the chat. She says,
"Hi, Jody."
Hi there. Since releasing music independently for the past 5+ years, I realized I may have been presenting myself ineffectively as the performer, when in fact I may be more of a singer-songwriter. Do you have any advice on where to start in restructuring my approach?
Well, that's a fantastic and wonderful question, and that would require of me, number one, to listen to your music, because I also, and to be honest, I have to tell you that I find a lot of artists way too self-deprecating with what it is that they really are. So words and calling yourself a singer-songwriter, calling yourself a performer, these are words to use to help others identify and understand who you are. If I were to hear your music, I would be able to tell you, okay, this comes from this bucket of feels, from this bucket of energy and thought, and that allows certain other things to occur. That allows other partners to come to the table. It allows for maybe refinements and thoughts to be generated down certain paths. I think who you are is Jody. And I say this not out of disrespect for your attempt to quantify or to qualify what it is and what you do and who it is you present yourself or how it is you present yourself in the marketplace. I do this to tell you that an individual who has committed themselves to doing what you do, you're already far in advance of many others, at least insofar as understanding some of the pressure points and the things that help you move your career forward and things that do not. Maybe a slight pivot on words, maybe just removing those words entirely is sufficient for you achieving your goals. I would be very happy to listen to the music that you have to offer, and I'm happy to make a recommendation or to suggest, hey, think about this, think about that. You know, the world is a very complex place when it comes to releasing music. I just literally did some segments specifically for the Sound Collective on a home music business track that talk directly to that truth. Sometimes what we think is our weakness peculiarly is actually one of our strengths. And I've come to this realization, particularly as a record producer, when I find myself in environments and I'm like, okay, we got to do another take on this, or we got to do another repeat of this. And then somebody, the artist, does their performance, and I'm like, holy shit, that was amazing. And they like, but I hate it. Why do you like it? What? And I try to share with as many people as I can, and I'd like to share with you, Jody, specifically, that the power for us as artists and musicians lives in what I call perfect imperfection. There are these moments, there are these things, there are these droplets that are impossible to replicate, but they happen to exist, and they exist in this moment to release, to energize your truth to others. Whether you choose to call yourself a singer-songwriter, whether you choose to call yourself a performer, if your music has these moments of perfect imperfection, you will find followers, I guarantee it. Sometimes the strategies we employ in releasing music are more at fault than what it is that we have within us as artists and what it is that we express through the intellectual property that we create. So for example, one of my closest friends is a fellow who's the head of business development at Sony, then moved to Warner in LA. And he's like, hey man, just tell everybody when they upload their stuff, to TuneCore, and because they're an independent artist and they want to release, you have to always list your 3 styles that you consider yourself to be the most aligned with in their list and their drop-down menu. Whatever the 3rd style is that you have put in your own words, make that the 1st. Whatever the 1st style is you put in that list, make it the 3rd. Leave the 2nd in the middle as is. And the reason is you'd be amazed how things cross-pollinate, where an environment where you don't see yourself quite as something, others might see you as precisely that thing. And in fact, they might say, wow, this is a new voice, a unique participant in this particular block that is called whatever it's called. And so I've done that. We know, so those watching at the Haus of Owl in Jordan from 12 Times, this was one of the strategies and things that we did immediately. And it worked immediately. Because if your stuff is good, if you have qualitative value in what you do, your music is true. And we all know the difference between true music and artificialized, stylized music. If your music is true, it will find an audience. You just need sometimes to maybe modify a little bit the methodology of how you impregnate the market with what it is that you naturally have. So, very good question, Jody. Again, I'm a little verbose, so I may have given perhaps the longest answer to the shortest question in the history of man. I apologize in advance. And I thank you for contributing. Are there any other questions? From the online folk, from the inline folk? Nope. Okay, we're going to just keep going here. I want to share a couple things about numbers with you again, because we're going to zoom through this like at lightning speed. Numbers. Welcome to the world of optics. So historically, people have understood that they gain prizes or they win this or they do this as a feature of numbers. But what the hell really are numbers? Like, honestly, who controls them? What are they about? What do they facilitate? So I want to give you guys in this room an understanding of my current relationships with some of the major labels and publishers and what their mathematical expectations are, so they can defend their job if they are going to bring you to the boardroom and say, hey, let's consider this person for being signed. So a couple things. You got to have a minimum of 5 to 10 million streams. That's across all the platforms that you exist in. And that sounds like a lot of streams. You'd be surprised it's not that complicated if you apply certain principles to actually finding and getting those streams. Those principles are on the last slide, and I don't know that we're going to make it there, but fundamentally, you need 5 to 10 million streams. You need roughly 500,000 engaged followers on Instagram, Facebook, what have you, some combination thereof. If you have a good manager, this is another discussion area that I was hoping to get to, they will leverage those numbers to your advantage. Just like the other side will try to leverage the counterpoint of it, and you eventually find yourself in some middle ground where you can negotiate certain things. But these are sort of minimums. These are kind of minimum benchmarks. And with regards to Spotify, and this is probably the most relevant one that guys that I know kind of look into now, they want to see that the streaming mathematics essentially is creating about $2,500 to $3,500 bucks a week. So understand that's not as mammoth humongous as you believe mathematically. It is an attainable, an achievable truth. And I'm going to give you examples of some very specific numbers I believe are on this sheet. There's a very peculiar thing that all of us in this room have kind of like subjected our lives to. And that is this notion that music charts are the holy grail. That they basically are, hey, music chart, this is where I am on the chart, rock and roll, you know, my future is set. And music charts are quite peculiar things. They used to be very reliable. They are now fundamentally almost meaningless. And I'm going to explain, I'm going to give you an example. So in the States, right, gold meant 500,000 units sold. Platinum meant 1 million, and then diamond meant 10 million. That was a very common practice. With the exception of Adele, virtually nobody even comes close to diamond sales in terms of physical products or anything anymore. I mean, those days are fundamentally gone. In Andy's and my first days, it was very commonplace. There were lots of bands that sold 5 million, 10 million, 15 million albums because that was the way that people connected to music. They needed the physical product so that they could actually enjoy it and participate with it. Well, today, in terms of physical sales, and that's itself a hilarious moniker because we know that there's no really such thing anymore. In physical sales, you are required for those same benchmarks now, 12.5%. So what used to be 1 million copies is now 125,000. Right? What used to be 10 million is 1.25 million. That's a hell of a difference when you consider where things used to be, and that you used to have basically scanned verification to assure sales, which also can be gamed and jerry-rigged. And I can tell you a Boys to Men story where basically the label said, hey, okay, let's put all the albums in the stores. And because radio is not really responding to their first single, I can't remember the name of the album, you have to forgive me. And so the label said, hey, let's go buy back all the albums from the stores. And that's literally what they did. So basically a glorified 22% distribution cost to them at the end of the day. They bought back all the albums. Suddenly the sales went through the roof. Suddenly radio took notice. Suddenly the songs were played. And that's a maneuver that was utilized in the past. The game of numbers has become, and this is the thing that fundamentally infuriates me. There's many things that infuriate me, but we'll just leave it at this particular thing for now. 1,500 on-demand audio or video song streams from an album are equivalent to one album sale. Who determined that? Why not 44,267? Why 1,500? What the hell does that have to do with anything? And then 150 streams means you've sold a single. So add all that math to this 12.5%, and the notion of what being gold or platinum or diamond means today has nothing to do with any true viability or meaning. It doesn't mean crap. That's why the stuff I said to you in the beginning has become the benchmark for labels, for even branding partners and what you do to actually advance your career. That's the reality of it. That's the foundational reality of it. We could talk about playlisting and social positioning. There's, the last thing, which is kind of interesting, is I'm like, and I tell to you guys this just from a practicality and straightforward principle. I am the way I am with everybody. I'm exactly like this. Anybody who knows me and has known me for years, this is who I am. So that I have these numbers, these really wonderful, sexy numbers attached to me, right? What do you actually think it buys me? I mean, except your wonderful faces on a lovely evening on a Thursday, rainy, crazy day in before the Easter weekend in New York City. What do you think that actually buys me? Yeah, chocolate. Okay, well, you are correct on that front, but what does it actually buy me? Okay, so that's an interesting point. So come up here and give your answer. So the question is, as everybody is like, okay, great, you have all these accolades, you have all this stuff. What the hell in the modern world does it actually buy me?
Leverage.
Okay, define what you mean.
Like network connections, like access, picking up the phone call and get, being able to get a meeting. Yeah.
So I didn't need any of that. I had all of that even before any of these numbers. Okay. Right? Because I started out as a drummer touring with some label acts. And so, in fact, to some degree, one of the first acts I toured with was a band called Mauve, M-O-E-V, which is a techno psycho pop band. I had a whole bunch of technology with me on tour with them. I was like way ahead of the curve with people taking all the stuff and playing to like loops live and me being in headphones. And if I fucked up, they are just dead on stage. They can't do anything. So I had to be right on point. They didn't even have a category at, so that was a Warner situation. They didn't even have a freaking category for them. So they created a whole new category and threw a whole bunch of bands in. And that was one of them. I met so many people on that tour. I still know some of those people today. I'm going to tell you the honest truth of what this buys me. Virtually shit all. And I will explain what I mean. At the end of the day, when I go into a recording studio and and I'm producing a band and I'm working with them, this maybe makes people listen maybe a teeny bit more to my recommendations. That's it. Why? Welcome to meism. And so this goes back to one of the subjects I spoke about right from the beginning. Today, thank you very much, Fernando. Once again, was big hand for leveraging. I am sharing with you truths because back in the day, it did used to have a meaning, because numbers used to have a meaning, because numbers were actually representative of something. Today, having those numbers is immaterial because everybody solves everything themselves and believes they have all the answers because the internet tells them all the truths. And the internet is not replete with truths, it's replete with misinformation, by and large, when it comes to creation and art. And I'm sharing this with you because if you choose to create artistically, it behooves you, like any person, to have been influenced by a whole whack of people in your past, right? Music that you loved, artists that you loved, productions that you loved, maybe even, Broadway shows that you loved, whatever the hell it was. If those people influenced you, that means that you did not just uniformly give birth to your own inner preferences. You were brought to that point. You have had expertise, touch, and benefit your ears and your thinking. Today, expertise is a website. It's not the collection of all the perfect imperfections that exist in one's life. It is fundamentally a ones and zeros game. And in this context, I mean programming games. So, while people know the people I've worked with, while people understand the value and the importance of it, that's at the most what maybe gets them to send me an email. After that, and this is my personal experience, and it's not everybody, not at all, but it's my personal experience in many occasions that people want me to vindicate their truth rather than contribute and help them with their truth. So people want me to be a lapdog. So the last band that I produced, for example, in the west coast of Canada, I went out to Indian with them before I flew out, back to New York. And I told them, I said, you guys are an anomaly. I've only in my entire career spent with 2 bands the time that I have and had the feelings come out of the situation that I have with you guys. One band from Spain called the Run Dogs, and you guys. They were supportive. They were like cheerleaders for each other. They were cohesive and thoughtful. And they wanted the up-leveling that 450 albums worth of work contributes. There is a trust. Today, the word community is a weaponized term. The word meism is kind of the way things go. And anybody who's ever worked with me in production, including Jordan, who's watching there, including, I suspect Graham is also watching there, will tell you, I love to talk, I love to discuss, I love to hear what people think, and I want the environment to speak their truth. But that does not mean that there aren't a whole whack of things that must be implemented and integrated into that environment to allow that to happen. Putting up a microphone in front of somebody, a 7-year-old can do that. Understanding which chain to fundamentally use, understanding how to share with them that redefine a little bit your words at this moment because it's going to deepen your message. Those are things that the internet will not do, and nor will AI. And the only thing I'm going to quickly share, because I mean, AI is itself, it's a whole massive subject, and I'm a believer in certain features of AI tremendously. But the one thing AI will never do, because it does still derive itself from static truths, is it cannot replicate many human truths. And the simplest one, and I've had discussions with AI engineers, and I have discussions on platforms and this and that and so on, which I find extremely interesting. Show me an AI algorithm for hope. I'm waiting. There's no such thing. But at the same time, if you consider that hope, right? What are you guys doing here? You hope to expand your career. You hope to advance things. Hope is a force like no other that affects decision-making. It affects decision-making on so many levels. And yet, if you exclude it from the process and the procedure of art, and from the process and the procedure of business, and from all it, you destroy the humanity of what it is you are doing, and you make bad decisions. And so there are limitations to all platforms. There are limitations to truths, and as I pointed out, these lovely numbers, which seem so sexy on a screen, have, in this modern world, tremendous limitations as well. Does not bother me, because the work that I've done, I'm very happy and I'm very satisfied with. And anybody who knows me also knows, Ron always looks forward. I want that next thing. There's so many beautiful, amazing projects. Like, for example, Bjork, if you're out there and you happen to be watching this, or one of your cohorts happen to be watching this, I beg you, give me a call. I will happily cut off my left arm, which doesn't help as a drummer, but I will happily cut off my left arm to work with you, okay? I still have my dreams. I still have many dreams that I have not fulfilled. I will do, like any of you, anything necessary to fulfill those dreams. I am just like you, all of you. I just happen to have walked a slightly different walk. But fundamentally, I started and I am exactly like all of you in almost every single way. I care about the same shit. I know how hard it is. The more you understand about the music industry, truthfully, not what you think it needs to be for you, the more effectively you're going to find your way through it. And you're going to be able to leverage that for success, for money, for stability. I think every muso that I know wants nothing more than just to have a normal, stable, positive, excellent life, doing something that is both physically and psychologically wonderful, and visceral, and additive. That's my belief. So, what else do we need to talk about? Management intermediaries. Get one. How's that for the quick? Oh, we have an arm up in the air. Yes. We have 5 whole minutes. Okay. So let's, okay, management, get one. Synchronization, here, I'll just do the last 5 minutes on synchronization. Synchronization might be the most effective modern way to leverage what you already create and find additional financial avenues for it. There's a landmark that basically changed it, and it's a funny thing. So it used to be, right, that if you, it was like you sold out. If you put music and gave it to a company to put in their ad, and then, who was it? What's that? I can't remember. Give me a second and I'll tell you. Because this is hilarious. This is bloody hilarious. Where is it? Too much words, too many words, so many goddamn words. Here we go. The Clash. Thank you. That's what it was. So the Clash then said, let's turn rebellion into money. And I'm like, okay. And suddenly it was cool to get syncs. The first artist that really busted it wide open was actually Sting in a Jaguar commercial. I don't know if some of you are old enough to remember that commercial, but it's him driving a Jaguar. One of the songs was playing, I think it was from Brand New Day. I think it is from that era. And it's like, okay, so there are multiple ways. So he's written the music, he's driving the car, he's visibly in the ad, and this whole marketing campaign is essentially built around his artistic ethic and what it is that he likes to do. That's really the thing that kind of blew it all open. And the sync world started to be a thing. What is a sync? Fundamentally, it is you synchronize sound, or what I like to call the audio footprint, to image, the visual footprint. And that is across gashmillions of different and growing every day ways of doing that in this modern world. Every single time a sync plays, you make money. Every single time. The way you make money is front end. People pay you. Hey, we want to use this in a commercial. Hey, we want to use this in this. You get residuals if that thing runs again every 3 months. You get back end from the performing rights organizations that collected, because it's public performance, right? When this performs somewhere on TV, on radio, so that's a public performance environment. Sync agents and supervisors are basically intermediaries. They facilitate. So SodaBox, where I am the head of business development in that company, that's one of the companies that I founded with a lady from Delaware. We sync to BBC. We sync, and we have a whole whack of artists that have all contributed their content. We've organized things. Boom. People want to use it. Because if it's good, it will find a home. I'm telling you, and I'm guaranteeing you this. If it's good, it will find a home. And when I say good, I don't mean because I think so. I mean because others think so. Important distinction. Very important distinction. Timelines, territories basically determine where, when, how, to whom, how many times you can get paid, all the structures. And then there's kind of new terms and new formats that have sort of evolved in the world of sync that the only thing I will point out to, the last thing I will say, I mean, I'm going to leave you on a happy note, but I'm going to leave you on an actual factual note. So this is one of the negative things about AI. So there are AI generators that you can go online, you can find, and you can enter a bunch of words like red, truck, crossing, river. And it'll generate for you a sonic landscape that it deems is associated with those words. Music supervisors who work in their own agencies is one thing. There's music supervisors that also work like at NBC Universal that are overseeing 3 to 5 shows and kind of dealing with all the music that has to be in those shows, which is an insane amount of work. And they're like, I'm freaking tired. So what do? They put in a bunch of words, what they think about a show. It goes to a generator, generates out some shit. They put that under a publishing company of theirs that they started under some other different name, and boom, and they submit it as a potential sync along with all the others and all of us who are competing, right, to put our syncs in those songs. That's an example of a gaming of the system. It's harder to do than it was, let's say, in the last 3 to 5 years, but it's still being done today. So understand, there are forces that you must acquit. There are frameworks you must understand. And there are fellows who you must make part of your phalanx. In so doing, you will, and I'm telling you this, I'm a perfect living example, you will advance your career. It is true, a big bulk of my career did not happen in the last 10 years. It happened over all the years. But you got to evolve. And I had to, just like everybody else, right? Evolve or die. And I haven't died. I'm still around. I'm still kicking. I'm still bleaching my hair. This is all rock and roll as far as I'm concerned. And I love this world. And I love you guys as part of my tribe. And I love being involved in it. So, listen, if we got to cut it off now, we got to cut it off now. Thank you to everybody who came here. Thank you to everybody online who participated in this. I'm sorry I couldn't get to the other 12 topics, of course, that I wanted to cover, but I really appreciate everybody's participation. I'm honored by this invitation that the Sound Collective put out, and I'm doing some work here with the Sound Collective to develop an entire business series that people can enjoy online and subscribe to. And I very much look forward to being back here and to enjoying myself with all you guys again at the Sound Collective. Thank you very much.